Okay, so let's jump into some James Bond, man. You know, uh, yeah, dead end, boom. You know what I mean?
It is
So sorry.
No, I was going to say it is impossible with a James Bond theme to not, keep your back straight and actually walk a little taller when that theme starts playing. It's like,
I know, right?
it's like, yeah, there's a whole thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, just to kick things off, right? So basically, what we're gonna do here, well, basically the point of this special here, is that we're just going to pretty much just state our best and worst of the Bonds, right? So that would be in this case here, Sean Connery, Roger Moore, and P.S. Brosnan, right? But we're also going to pay a little tribute to, Timothy Dalton and George Lazenby as well, right? But before we begin, because, it's, just the retrospect review section here. So as usual, we just have to talk about how we got into these films in the first place, right? So I'll just kick things off and you guys could just follow through afterwards, right?
All right.
So for me, I'll just make this quick. I kind of just knew about the character through cultural osmosis, sorry, right? But at the time I didn't have any cable. This is in the 90s, basically, right? So I didn't really know about I've never seen the Doctor Nose or the Gold Fingers and all that kind of stuff, right? But you've seen, stuff like that referenced before in numerous, shows and whatnot, right? I always remember, like, even in Sesame Street, right? There was this, Cookie Monster themed section called Monster Piece Theater. And and there was actually a sketch called Dr. No, you know what I mean? So that all just goes to show how influential the character of James Bond is, right? So for me, I imagine this is same for a lot of Gen Xers, especially in Trinidad. I was like officially introduced to the character through a film called GoldenEye because I remember when it came out theatrically in '95. I was in primary school at the time, so I was slightly too young to see it. I was 14 years and over. I was just like what, like 3 or 2 years younger. So it was like that. So I just kind of was hoping that one day I would see this film, right? And then 2 years later, Tomorrow Never Dies. And then 2 years later, what was it? Will Is Not Enough, right? So around the time that I got cable, this was in the early 2000s. That's when I finally saw those three films, right? I believe the first two used to show on USA. So it is. You're watching a film and you're enjoying it, and then they go for a break. Like, you know what I mean? Instead of run and get your drinks and come back, right? But I'll never forget Will Is Not Enough airing on cable and actually watch it when it premiered. And I'll get to my thoughts on that afterwards. Or actually, I should just say it right now. It was I for what it was. I mean, the opening sequence was really cool. It ran for 20 minutes. Um, but even then and up to now, it's just one of those Bond films that I just didn't really care for. You know what I mean? But at the time though, I mean, P.S. Brosnan, right? This was like the first time I was seeing a film. I imagine for a lot of like women and Gen X women in particular, yeah, that this he is their Bond. You know what I mean? He is the one that they love because I mean, no lie, I mean, P.S. is a handsome dude. I ain't gonna front, right? So it kind of makes sense, right?
He's like a fine wine. He's only gotten better with age, honestly.
I'll say that with, but
I
I'll
mean,
say that with another actor, but I'll get to him in a bit, right?
I'm excited.
So yes, so
Excited to see him
yeah.
in Doctor Fate as Doctor Fate in Black Adam. Definitely.
Oh yes, yes, yes. He's gonna be in
Awesome.
that for
Listen,
real.
I am so ready for that, but that's another story for another time. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So around the time now when this film now came out, that would be Die Another Day. I remember this was one of the first movies that I saw on, as we see it, Trinidad Pirate. So yes, we got like back in the
Oh,
days when
wow.
people literally used to come with the camera and just film everything and then like
Yeah.
leave, and you used to make fun of these people walking past the screen. So yeah, I
Yeah.
saw a
Yeah.
cam copy of that because I didn't even go cinema to see because I heard bad things right off the bat, and then the song, which you're gonna get into, just did not work for me at all. It didn't have me excited at all, right? But I waited till it came out on cable, and I was like, yeah, good thing I didn't go and see it in theaters, right? So yeah, that was like my official introduction to Bond. Right? It was PS. So afterwards, now I jumped into the Sean Connery ones, the Roger Moores and all that kind of stuff, right? And I'll just say right off the bat, controversial, maybe or maybe not. I think that Sean Connery has the best track record at the moment of the Bonds, right? And when I mean track record, I mean that a majority of his films are hits. Like they just like really solid films, with the exception of his final one, Diamonds Are Forever, which is cool, but it just felt tired and watered down. It just felt bland overall, right? I jumped into the Roger Moores. I'll get to him in a bit too, you know what I mean? And then, and it's one of those things that you kind of realize, oh wait, there was George Lazenby and there was Timothy Dalton, and I
Boy.
sought those films out as well, right? It's like, wow, it's almost like you're in a library and you just have like this shelf. So a shelf is, all the bonds. So you're just seeing Sean,
Mhm.
Sean, Sean, Roger, 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 P.S. And somewhere in the middle you see a George or you see a Timothy. It was something like that, right? But yeah, so long story short, I basically watched out the older films during that period, and I was able to do that before Casino Royale, which was the first Bond film that I saw in theaters. And yeah, basically just to close things off, I have seen all except for No Time to Die of Daniel Craig's films in theaters. Those were the only Bond films that I've ever seen theatrically, right? And even though I didn't really care that much for Quantum of Solace or Spectre, I just appreciate the fact that I was able to see a Bond film in theaters. Because I mean, I wasn't alive when Sean Connery was doing his thing or when Roger Moore was doing his thing, right? So just lucky enough to at least be alive to see a Bond or Bond series, sorry, in theaters. So Ricardo, how did you get into the Bond universe thing?
Yeah, my both of my parents are really into Bond. They really loved it.
All right,
They
all right.
they carry me to they go to a lot of theaters when they were young, and they carry me to theaters when I came of age. So I watch. So they talk about Bond all the time, reference a lot of Bond all the time. And then when the Bond movies came out, this was the first I saw in theaters was GoldenEye.
Nice, nice,
We were
nice.
just going to see all the Pierce Brosnan stuff in
Mhm.
theaters. It's pretty damn awesome. All of them are
All
pretty
right.
good. And
Quick
then
question: How did you feel coming out of that other day? First
oh
time,
no, yeah,
first time.
right. So I actually I actually liked that Die Another Day for what it was. It was like so incredibly silly and campy and ridiculous for what it was. But yeah, it's pretty bad. It's like borderline Austin Powers nonsense, right?
Yeah, yeah.
In fact, it's sillier than Austin Powers, I would argue. But I remember at the time enjoying it, and the big hype was Halle Berry and wherever it is. But I remember the conceit of it being kind of clever, which is the whole medical morph Shang Tsung thing they was doing right in Cuba. Uh,
Shang Song,
and,
yes, for
all right,
real.
and then the
Yeah.
big reveal, the reveal of who the villain was. I was like, okay, that kind of clever. But the rest of the film is total goofiness. But I remember having fun with it, just to be honest. For what it was. Yeah, that's about it. But yeah, enjoyed the PS movie. I enjoyed two of the PS movies, and then I don't like two of the others, like for what they are. Right, I like the first PS. I really like the one with Michelle Yeoh in it.
Tomorrow Never Dies. Yeah, I
Right.
I enjoyed the hell out of that one.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah.
that was pretty cool. The one after that sucked. The only thing I liked about that was
The world is not enough.
yeah,
Yeah.
the one that was the one with the boat, with the black boat opening sequence, right? The small black
Yeah.
thing that
Hmm.
he was driving around. Yeah, that's the only thing that was cool in that. Everything else was bullshit. Um, and then yeah, Golden. I'm sorry, not Golden. The last one.
Die Another Day.
Die Another Day, right? That one was again. I had fun with it, but yeah, it's incredibly silly. But I remember just having fun because of how silly it was, but what was noticeably bad about it, and what was the something I immediately noticed was it was after 9/11. Like,
Yes.
how
Yes.
we getting this now? Like Bond could exist now, and that's why a lot of people wasn't really feeling it for what it was. That's about it. In terms of that sketching up the rest of the franchise, I really like saw a lot of that on VHS and on VHS and cable. I caught most of those for the most part, and then I had to see.
Oh, sorry to cut you there, but I now remember there used to be a point in time. I think it was on Mondays. USA used to run like
Run, yeah,
James
you should
Bond
run a bunch of
marathons,
those. Yes,
and that's
yep.
how I caught up on it before
Me
I
too.
actually like
Yep,
watched them in detail
that's
now.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. It showed up a couple of the popular ones on Cinemax and whatever, but then you caught most of them on USC. That's how I caught a lot of them. To be yeah, that's same thing for me. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. It's I like some of the Sean Connery films. This is a kind of unpopular opinion, but I noticed it isn't. I always thought it was, but it doesn't. I on Her Majesty's Secret Service is one of my favorites. Probably like the top five or so.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Okay.
um, then Timothy Dalton is pretty good. Like Living Daylights is pretty damn good, I find.
It
I
is. It
judge him with
is.
music, and then yeah, that's how I kind of judge the franchise for what it is. I'm very biased towards Live and Let Die because Is his name, isn't it? And is he
Yeah,
back
yeah.
together?
Yafet Koto,
Yeah, but
Geoffrey
but no,
Holder. Is it?
yeah, Jeffrey
Yeah.
Holder, right? Yep, Jeffrey Holder. It's like, yeah, Jeffrey Holder, you have a Trinity movie. It's like, good. Um, but it's pretty middle of the road Bond. And then the ones that I thought I would have liked that end up kind of sucking, like Man of the Golden Gun and whoever it is. Yeah,
Well, I'm gonna get to that one.
yeah.
So,
As I said, we could just like I'm not the biggest like super fan of Bond as I thought I was, but like I realize I know more than most, to be honest. In terms of the franchise and really, we had to talk about the working history and the context and the political and geopolitical context of Bond and the time and why it is that the franchise floundering now. I would argue. But yeah, that's pretty much my takes on it.
right. Alice, how did you? Well, just quickly, how did you get into the Bond franchise?
Well, I got into the Bond franchise due to my dad because he was obsessed with those books to begin with. He had the whole collection, the book collection,
Oh, nice.
and yeah,
I need to read those though. Like, I really need to seek them out.
yeah, yeah. He had the whole book collection, and he would relate to me that he saw the Bond films when they came out in cinema when he was younger. Um, and by the way, he had seen all at that point. So when I was of
Wow.
age, I was able to watch all of them with him, and I've watched all the Bond films, including with the exception of No Time to Die, several times, all of them, because he just made me totally obsessed with that character. I have to say, um, in terms of like my favorite Bond, I am kind of different from you guys. I preferred Roger Moore as my favorite Bond.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
Pierce
okay.
Brosnan was, well, he's attractive, but I can't get over the fact that he's a bit hairy.
Oh,
Um,
I was going to, I would have said that about Sean Connery.
Sean,
You know,
Sean,
yeah,
when Sean
like
pulled
I
that
don't-
chest
yeah,
open
yeah,
so
like
yeah,
I,
much.
I
yeah. They're
don't
both
know,
pretty
I don't
hairy.
know. Like every time you see Sean shirtless, though, I'm wondering, like, okay, women in the '60s and early '70s really thought that was sexy. Like they
Yeah,
really looked
yeah.
at
There
that
was
and
a
be like,
time.
God
Yeah,
damn.
yeah. There was a time that they thought that that was sexy, so that never really appealed to me. Sean Connery had his charm, but the embodiment of the James Bond character itself, for me, I thought Roger Moore nailed it every time. Yes, a few of his movies I'd have to say were kind of out there in terms of plot as well. I agree with you guys that The Man with the Golden Gun was was very sketchy. But for the most part, I'm obsessed with that franchise. I've read Bond trivia up and down all around and know a lot of Bond trivia. I actually downloaded all themes and I have it saved in my computer and I listen to them over and over
Nice.
again.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes. And yes, I agree with you, that another day sucks. But yeah. But apart from that, that's my introduction to it, and that's why I still love the franchise. And I would have an annual James Bond fest every year where I would watch them one after the other for like a week straight.
Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
There's well, good thing you bring up that though because there's two in particular that I could just recommend easily as far as like a double feature, just like watch them one back to back, right? CC, of course, we're gonna save you for last, right? And I'll say why after Tracy, right? So yeah, Tracy, how did you get into the franchise?
I genuinely have no idea how it happened. All I know is I have a great many of the DVDs, and I don't remember where I started watching it. I don't know if it was AVM because at one point in time, AVM, especially during on July August vacation, you would get like Superman 1 and 2 and something else and like a Bond. I'm not sure how it happened, but I do remember sitting down and seeing what was it? It's Goldfinger, Golden Eye, Goldfinger, one of them.
Is it Sean Connery's
Sean,
Goldfinger or Pierce's
It's
GoldenEye.
Sean's. It's Sean's. It's
Okay, well
Sean's.
that's GoldenEye.
So it's gold. Yeah. So
Sorry.
Sean's is
Oops, oops, oops.
Goldfinger.
That's Goldfinger. Goldfinger. Oops.
Yeah,
Oops.
this is a great time to have for me to have a brain fart about James Bond. But I remember seeing it, and literally that image of the girl covered in gold and like dead, and
Oh, that is
uh,
iconic. That is iconic.
that is something that stuck with me. And very weirdly, um, I so this is a weird one, but I do remember AVM of themselves. AVM used to play James Bond Jr., a very short-lived cartoon.
Oh, I remember bits of it. I never like saw an
I
episode in its entirety.
I
That
remember.
show had a kick-ass theme song. Eh?
Listen,
Okay.
I fan casted myself long before people was all about like fan casting themselves. I fan casted myself. I always said, you know what, if I could legitimately do it, I would be his black cousin, his black nephew. It's just Uncle James. We don't have to get into the politics as to how he's this color, but it's just James Bond Jr. And I remember being in.
Listen. You take a few more vacations in Jamaica, okay?
Plus, you know, whatever. Well, however it happened, I don't care. It was just like, I remember James Bond Jr. I remember being in the library of one of our high schools and just scanning through some of the books there. And there was one or two, because they had novelized a couple of James Bond Jr.'s adventures. So between that, and then, you know, because Uncle James was never really in the picture, but you know, like once or twice you would hear them, you know, like you would just see the shadow of Uncle James or something along those lines. So I have that, and then I actually have the films themselves. And then I started getting the DVDs, and like, you know, like Alice, I love some of the trivia. I'm very much into like the behind the scenes of why things happen the way they do. So like for me, what are we in 2021? It was earlier this year or last year. Somebody posted up the thing about the crocodiles. And one of the
Oh,
in
live and let die.
Live and Let Die when
Oh, I
he's
love that
crossing.
scene, by the way.
And
That
I'm
scene
like,
is awesome.
how is people now knowing this? This is like for me, this is not a thing, because I had the DVDs. So I'm very much into like I'm very much into Bond. I give Bond credit for doing something in terms of changing the idea of or reinventing the idea of what a movie villain should feel and look like. Because like as much as here's a classic example, I love the idea of like Dr. No is sitting down across from him, across the table, and having a dinner conversation with him. And yes, he is going to kill him if he doesn't bend to his will. There is a harpoon under the desk, but there is the idea of this villain almost on a Moriarty kind of level. And that's why, you know, like when I watch Mission Impossible, especially, well, Mission Impossible now feels like, okay, Bond has waned, and Mission Impossible sort of started taking, you know, kind of moving into that space, especially like when they did MI5 with Solomon Lane. And I remember Spectre came out that year, and I wasn't 100% overwhelmed with Spectre, but I looked at Solomon Lane in Mission Impossible and I thought, this is a Bond villain. So they actually just moved into that sort of territory. But Bond for me always had like this kind of special, this special earnest place. Yes, the names of his female characters were always either deeply hilarious or deeply like, okay, what are we doing here? Mary Goodnight and BB Doll, Agent BB Doll, which is Baby Doll, and Solitaire, and all these kinds of things. Yes, you have that going on. Anna Blackman, you know, even up to before she died, Anna Blackman will still go on record as saying that every other Bond girl was a floozy, but Pussy Galore was like the greatest Bond girl that has ever lived, because that's the character that she played. And so I like these kinds of things around him. I don't know, like after you know, when Daniel goes, I'm gonna have my period of not caring about the franchise. But the minute they say we have honed down 4 actors to play the next James Bond, I know my hype is going to be off the chain again, because it was that way when Pierce. When they had the press conference for Pierce and all that kind of stuff. So, I like Bond. I like Bond's themes. I too, like Alice, have like a whole bunch of themes floating around. I did one time, I don't know, I think it was on my Mac or something, but I did have like a 10-minute medley that some group of musicians had done, and it was the better Bonds from Russia with Love and Thunderball and all this kind of thing melded into this 10-minute arc, and then of course the actual Bond theme. So yeah, that's me, for better or worse. And there were some worse, and there are some betters. Um, I'm here to see what's next in terms of the Bond franchise on the whole. Oh, also, in terms of that movie that we will talk about later, that we're not all together thrilled with, Michael Wilson. I remember watching the behind the scenes featurette where Michael Wilson, who is the stepson of Cubby Broccoli, he was talking about how that movie is going to revolutionize how Bond is going to be made, because now we have access to all this amount of CGI and we can do all this, kind of take Bond into places that we, couldn't have gone before. And I'm glad that they didn't go in that direction. I know that the family tends to be very protective about what Bond is and who Bond should be and all that kind of BS. But I'm glad in this one respect that they didn't bother to go down that direction that they thought was going to be revolutionary, and just instead make Bond human again in terms of, well, Danielle coming into it. But that's another conversation. I'm just I'm a Bond boy, so there's that.
All right. So last but not least, and I have to give like a little backstory here first quickly. So when Ricardo and I reviewed Spectre when it came out back in 2015, at the time CC had not seen any of the films, right?
Yeah.
So I believe it was last year or early this year. I found this out through Facebook and Instagram. You just did a deep dive into all the films, and I saw your 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 reactions to them, so to speak, right? So if you could just give us like a quick summary of just thoughts, just going in blind, or I should say, seeing the full franchise play out, for the first time.
Yeah. I swear your listeners are gonna start getting this impression that you just bring me on when you want to like spice things up. No.
No, no,
Um,
no.
okay, so here's the thing. As Matthew has already said, I did not grow up with Bond whatsoever. No exposure, nothing. The thing that I feel like I became aware of around the time I was, teenager and really getting into genre fiction and like really getting into like subgenres and the way the genres are defined is you can't talk about the spy genre without Bond. And so as I was kind of watching like other spy films, even films that had nothing to do with Bond, like Looney Tunes back in action, there's this elephant in the room of this juggernaut urtext that's just kind of hovering over the proceedings, and everything is either reacting against it or homaging it or whatever. So I eventually got to the point where I realized that like I needed to sit down and give these films a watch. And I was in Los Angeles doing my final semester in film studies as an undergrad, and the film school I was at had this great film library, and I blew an entire month, if not a little more, because they had all the James Bond films. And I was like, well, there's all this hype because this was pre-COVID, so at the time, No Time to Die was a couple months away. And I was like, oh, this would be a good time to sit down and see what all the fuss is about, and like really go through these films and let's see what everyone's talking about. Midway through Connery, I remember thinking it's gonna get better from here, right? Like it's gotta like it's gotta it can't all be like this, right? Like we gotta um I remember calling my parents after I'd seen the first Roger Moore, Live and Let Die, and I was like, I was prepared for the sexism, but no one told me about the racism. And then towards
But
the
what
tail,
nicknames is for Tombstone's Honky?
oh my god, oh,
I love that line.
and
I love
then
that line. I'm sorry.
as I'm getting into like later Roger Moore, I am like, it started around later Roger Moore's really when these films were starting to feel like a chore, and I was like I love long films. I watched Bernardo Bertolucci's The Last Emperor the other night. 2.5 hours just flew by. For some reason, the Bond runtimes were just starting to feel longer and longer and longer as I am getting through these films. And by the time I'm finally up to Craig, I get this brief burst of excitement with Casino Royale, and I'm like, oh,
Oh, wait. What about PS, man? What about the PS?
um, Pierce Brosnan and I have a complicated relationship because I actually really do. I enjoy those two middle ones. I really don't feel with GoldenEye. I need to watch it again because I have been unable to make it through the whole film without falling asleep, and it feels bad to say, but like I need to sit down and rewatch GoldenEye. But I like the two middle Pierce films, and then Die Another Day is fascinatingly bad. Like, because I'm sitting there and I'm watching Die Another Day, and I'm like, this feels like this weird hybrid of like trying to bring back the camp of early Bond, but it's
Yes.
somehow needing
Yes.
all of the access of the '90s. Like, you remember that period in the '90s when everything was over the top and excessive,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
so it feels like this weird attempt to like bring back the camp. And I will say this, I love camp. I really do love camp. I love there's a lot of stuff that people think is cheesy or goofy that I just earnestly love with like no reservations. Like I love original series Star Trek. I love Forbidden Planet. Um and even when it comes to dated content, like I recently was in a Goodwill and came out with a stack of John Wayne films. It's not dated content, but
Right.
there's I feel like my as I was watching my way through Bond, and Bond kind of dominated my brain as I was watching through these films. The thing I found myself being frustrated by was that it felt like these films weren't changing even as film history was moving on around them. So like the first film comes out in like the mid 60s, like 64, 65.
62 to be
62. There
precise.
you go.
Yeah.
Like we've only just left the 50s,
Hmm.
and I don't notice a difference in content or style or the way we handle anything until maybe the 70s, and I'll get to that one when I talk about best and worst of the Roger Moore era. But like the Bond franchise feels like one of those IPs that is very stubborn when it comes to changing and evolving. Like it feels
Yep.
like Bond has become one of those brands where people who like, and I'm not obviously like not everyone, but like it feels like a lot of the people who watch Bond and enjoy Bond, and certainly the people who like manage the IP, have this philosophy of okay, the world around Bond and the spy genre and film may change, but people going to see a James Bond movie know what to expect. There's like a certain checkbox list of things that you know going into a James Bond movie you're going to get, and then you get them. And there are films, and I will say there are Bond films, and I'm not saying this, I hate the franchise. It's one of those franchises that confuses me. There are individual installments I adore. There are individual installments that I kind of want to put my eyes out with a spoon. But then there are um, I've never hated a Bond theme song except one. And then
Uh-huh.
it's but as a brand, as an IP, as an overarching franchise, that is one of the longest lasting ever. I think maybe only Godzilla is an older continuous franchise than James Bond with more
Yeah.
installments. But
Yes. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, yeah.
James Bond is now what 6 decades old at this point because like 62 and then we're coming up on 2022. We're
Yeah, it's
six
gonna turn 60 next year. Yeah.
this franchise is 60 years old, and again I love a lot of older there's a lot of older content that I really appreciate, but at the same time when I'm watching any franchise I always expect it to kind of evolve and change and adapt to the time, and Bond feels like it hasn't, even as the spy genre around it has, like I feel like the spy genre around Bond has evolved and gone through more trends and explored more new ideas and different things than Bond itself has at this point. So like I have this weird, complicated, like kind of lab animal and scientist relationship with the James Bond franchise, where I understand that it's a pop culture juggernaut and it's one of the most enduring and long-lasting IPs. And there's a lot of ways in which it has affected pop culture. And there's a couple individual installments I have on DVD because I had genuinely enjoy them that much, but I have a very hard time quite understanding what all the fuss is about. Like, I have a very hard time overall, and with the other ones. Like, I'm still trying to summon up the enthusiasm to watch No Time to Die after making it through Spectre and being like, that was it. That was that
Noel,
bad.
Noel. To be fair, even as a Bond fan, same here. Because Spectre was terrible.
Spectre
Yep.
was bad. Like,
It was underwhelming for me, man.
I
It was
was
underwhelming.
shocked. Like, I
Yeah.
was like, and every time, and like a bad Bond film feels weird because it's like you've been at this so long, you'd think you'd have like figured out how to like at this point in time, if a new Star Trek movie comes out, I have a certain amount of faith in the people behind it because I'm like, you've all been
Right.
doing this for a certain amount of time. You've all
Right.
been doing this and you've been managing this IP. Same thing with Star Wars, or and
Right.
at this point even Marvel, even though Marvel's only like 10 years old. Like, I have a certain like, okay, you've been doing this for a while. You know what this works. You know what the formula is. You know what the expectations are, but you also know how to subvert them and change them.
Right. Enough. Yeah.
Yeah, and Bond always feels like they lean more into the formula. Like, I'm always shocked when people who are like, Westerns are all the same and I don't like them. Now, excuse me while I go rewatch the Bond franchise again. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
what are you talking about? I'm so confused. Yeah, so that is my complicated. It's this weird combination of frustration, confusion, with occasional spikes of enjoyment, and then more confusion is kind of my feelings about James Bond at this
Right.
point.
Yeah.
No, yeah,
But,
fully
go on,
understandable.
Ricardo.
No, fully understandable because here's the thing: Bond is something, as I said, it's inevitably tied up with boomers.
Oh my god.
Let's just be clear with that. Everything that boomers idealize, which is the Cold War and all the fears and all the aesthetics, everything like that whole aesthetic of the 60s, driving a fancy car on some island somewhere. That's it. I mean, it's a pure aesthetic thing. And it's one of those aesthetics that literally, I'm using that word hard L, literally cannot evolve, right? That's the whole problem. Like, you can't bring back the aesthetic unless you're going to cater to the past. That's why James Bond past the 90s had to like comment on stuff being post 90s. And it's like, you're kind of outdated and not making any sense. And they had to comment on it, right? And that, so the franchise never really evolved in any interesting way unless you're going to evolve the actual geopolitics. No one wants to do that. They still want to say, hey, there's a bad guy over there that's vaguely communist, maybe.
Well,
But
like,
they kind of have to do that.
And like, I was shocked, like, and I hate saying things like this because you're like, people assume it's hyperbole. Every single James Bond villain, even if he is played by like an American or British actor, is some kind of racial minority. Every single, even the times when it's like GoldenEye, where like the bad guy's another agent. And one of my frustrations with GoldenEye is that the bad guy's another agent. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. Maybe there's internal conflict between this agency. And I'm going to get into this more when I get into my favorite Bond movie. But like, plot twist, he's actually half ethnic because like he's part Cossack or
Oh
something.
yeah, I remember that.
You have to bring that up.
It's
You have to bring
like,
that up.
every single one. They're like Japanese, German, Russian, black, and and I'm like, why does this? And then even when you get into more, and I'm like, okay, whatever. But then by the time you get to the 2010s, and we're still doing this, I'm like, okay, guys,
It's also
like, it's a little bit like at that point it becomes clear this is something that someone internally has decided has to be a feature of the franchise, and I'm always like, why?
I think I think one of the main problems is the people behind the scenes, right? If it's not Ian Fleming, it's Harry Saltzman, right? And Albert Broccoli, right?
Broccoli.
You're right.
Yeah, the
And
Broccoli,
his
right?
children.
It's
But-
like, well, they did this thing in the 60s, so we kind of have to pay tribute to them, right? And even with all the legal stuff that was going on behind the scenes, it's like, well, we kind of have to stay true to it. So that's why the films always have this resemblance. You always kind of have to copy and paste the same formula now.
It's the thing that's so. Oh, go ahead, Tracy. Actually,
No. Finish, and then I'll think it up.
well, and it's
Oh,
weird
by the way,
because-
Alice, agree to disagree, yeah?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I will always take room for disagreements because like I'm trying to understand here. But like, one of the things, like I was very thrown off when, like, we got No Time to Die coming out, so there's all this new Bond press and everyone's talking about Bond, and then of course, hovering like like a shadow over the whole thing is the news that Amazon has bought MGM, which means that James Bond is now an Amazon property. And then Barbara Broccoli or whoever it is swoops in to be like, rest assured, Bond is going to stay exactly the same as Bond has always been. Nothing is going to change under Amazon. We're not changing our politics. We're not doing any kind of radical reworkings. We're not doing like a Bond as a television series or any spin-offs. It's going to be continue to be movies, and we're already looking for the next Bond. And I'm like, I'm sure for some people that this was a very encouraging press release. This was very reassuring. Not for me. Not for me. I was hoping we get like some shakeup at this point.
I feel like there has to be, because after that whole legal thing that we hint about in terms of Saltzman and Broccoli, his children, and by extension his stepson is Michael Wilson, and his actual daughter is Barbara Broccoli, but they always refer to them as the Broccolis. I feel like if it's not so much to let's keep what let's try to honor Dad and what he had, but I feel like they've painted. I didn't say painted because this happened long before they were born, but they have kept the general box, the general frame of this is what Bond is, and then in terms of even the people who, and I myself am guilty of this. I know what I'm going in when I go to see a Bond. I know that there is a pen that Bond has that's going to turn into a hovercraft. So
Right.
like I know that kind of shit.
Right,
So
right.
even when you take, let's say, all of that, like Triple X with Growler, I can't remember his name right now.
With
Growler.
Vin Diesel,
Vin.
which by the way, at the
Triple X.
time, was a very good blend of, okay, this is the
This
Bond
is how,
formula, but we're gonna
Right.
add a little humor to it, a little tongue-in-cheek humor as well too. So this is like edgy, we 2000s let the bodies hit the floor era
right.
version of James Bond. And I
Right.
actually defend State of the Union as well too. Dumb as
Extreme.
hell, but I enjoy that movie as a
I
guilty
don't know
pleasure.
if I ever really sat down to State of the Union, but that's another story all by itself. I don't know, and this might be my hot take of the afternoon, but I don't know where the Broccolis, like what the Broccolis could do that would actually satisfy us. In that, and here's what I mean when I say that. There's been a lot of hype around around Lashana. The idea of Lashana, when word came out that she is the new 007, there were people who were going completely amazed and all this kind of stuff. Oh my God, she's a new 007. I was like, well, yes, she is a new 007 because clearly Bond, as Daniel Bond, has gone to retire, or he gets shot again or something, and he's retired in Jamaica. So the title of 007 is going to fall to the next agent that is available to take his place. But there's to say like, okay, tomorrow morning we're going to have. It's like when Doctor Who came out and said the new Doctor is going to be female. It was something that we needed. It was something that was a change. It was something that a lot of us were like, this is actually a good thing because the Doctor and the Master has regenerated into both male and female forms. We understand this. They always talk about that. And yet something happened in BBC, in the writing and everything like that, that it just started to flounder. And the first thing that people started to complain was, oh, well, it's because it's a female doctor, which is not the truth. So I'm wondering now, yes, we can have a bit of evolution, and then you have the fast franchises. You have Mission Impossible 900 because Mission Impossible is not going to end anytime soon. You have all these
Well. To
offshoots.
be fair, as long as Tom Cruise is alive, right? So
Yeah, well, yeah,
just
because
be real. Yeah.
my boy, he just jump off of everything. But it's like, there's so many offshoots that have been born off of Born. I mean, even the Man from Uncle and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love that.
Which I really felt should have been given a second chance with the Warner Brothers movie, but that's another story. I don't know what Barbara and Michael could say or do that may necessarily work in terms of reimagining it, because they tried that with Die Another Day, and he did say, and that's what I was alluding to earlier, when he did say in like one of the behind the scenes featurettes on the DVD, he was there and he was talking about this is going to be revolutionary, we're going to do new things, and this is going to be the start of a new thing, and then it flopped because of many reasons, yes, but it just didn't feel Bond. So the next thing that they decided to do was, okay, let's make him human, which is where we bring Daniel into the mix. But I feel that as long as we're moving forward, even the actors themselves know that there is something inherently wrong with Bond. Daniel has always said this man has, is an alcoholic. God knows how his liver has survived all these years. They made a joke in one of the Pierce Brosnan films talking about his liver. I think it's Die Another Day.
Yeah, Die Another Day did that.
And he's always going to be, for want of a better way of putting it, he's always going to be straight, white, and male. So
Right.
what then do we do? Do we say, okay, after Die Another Day, let's pull a Star Wars and let's not have Bond in our lives for quite a while, and then bring him back like how they tried to do with the sequels and stuff? Or do we lean into the idea of let's do a deliberate change with Bond? Let's go and get, I don't know, John Cho to be the new Bond. We know Idris is too street, quote unquote, to be James, but surely there must be some brown actor out there who is actually capable enough to be Bond. What exactly
Henry Golden.
them? And
Henry
listen,
Golden.
I would live for Henry Golding in almost anything except for G.I. Joe. But yes,
Yeah, Snake Eyes, no. No.
but I feel because I feel for them in terms of trying to make something new while still appealing to, I don't know, shareholders who are 100. But I'm not too sure where their wiggle room could do. The best wiggle room that they may have had, really and truly, might have been Daniel. And we're not going to talk about Daniel right now. But yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Right. So I just want to drop two quick ideas, right, before we jump into the our favorite teams, right? So these were just two ideas. Well, one in particular that just kind of hit my head, hit my brain, literally while you were talking there, Tracy. And another one was just this idea that I had a while back, right? So, as you're talking about, the future of Bond, I mean, maybe there could be a series. Just pitching the idea, maybe call the double O's. Maybe you might just see the other double O's from 0 to, I don't know, 9, and we just exclude 7 because 7 is somewhere about, right? And you just kind of focus on them. They're trying to survive. They're trying to keep themselves paid and whatnot. They're doing the assassination / secret agent jobs, right? And you make a series out of that, so you see other double O's. It's not just 7 and hints of, oh well, I replaced the 006 or 008. He got killed somewhere, right? Because usually there's usually a 00 got killed somewhere, so that's why we brought you in, Bond, right? And this idea that I had, right, it just kind of came as a parody of Logan, right? As in, the Wolverine film, right? Basically, we see old man Bond, and I mean literal old man Bond, right?
Yeah, but
He's retired, he's washed up and all that kind of stuff. But here's the twist, though. Or I should say, one of, if not like a majority of his children, because remember, this guy has been knocking up women for decades, right? One of those
in
kids
Russia, in India, in all over the place,
Japan, in Jamaica,
Japan. Oh,
everywhere. So one of these kids shows up, so that would be like the X-23 or whatever this character from Logan, and you just have this kind of father son or father daughter thing, and this is like the last adventure you're gonna see with Bond, right? And
I am
how
willing to lose weight for that role. I'm just saying, I'm willing to lose weight and go on a diet for that role.
yeah,
That is
and
the closest I will get to James Bond Jr.
yeah, and
Yeah,
of course, guys. I mean, Button and Thelma, how wrong I am, right? But here's the catch of all of this, right? This is Cell. Just like Logan, let it be an R-rated film, because I mean, for 60 years in, we have not gotten an R-rated Bond film. I don't know if this is the direction after No Time to Die. I doubt it, but I mean, come on, bro. Come on.
Matthew, there's already a movie like that, and Michael May made it. It's a masterpiece. It's called The Rat. It's called The Rock.
I know.
I
John
was
Mason.
really about to
We
say.
played, Sean Connery played John Mason. And there's always this rumor that he's actually James Bond that was locked up.
I was literally about to say we've already got the old man James Bond film, and it's called Michael Bay's The Rock. And I will
Rock,
say,
yeah.
if
I love The Rock, by the way. I mean, I did a review.
oh yeah,
of it.
no,
Yeah.
I will like if I'm not having to pick an actual James Bond movie, my favorite Sean Connery James Bond film is Michael Bay's The Rock. I will go out there. I will save my actual one for when we get there, but for the record, my favorite Sean Connery James Bond is The Rock. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. I mean, because there's always been the rumor flying about that John Mason is actually James Bond, but you know, when you really have that in the back of your mind when you watch the show, it just makes it so much better. You know what I mean?
It makes so much more sense.
It does actually.